I don't usually write about hikes unless there's a funny mishap or a view worth bragging about. But this has been sitting behind my eyes since the first weekend of this month, and sleep hasn't fixed it. I'm a freelance photographer with too much time between jobs. So when Callum texted about a traverse over the Cairngorm Plateau, up over the Granite Crown and a bivvy by the loch, I said yes in a heartbeat. Nate came because he's the only one who brings proper coffee gear above 1,000 meters, and because he hates the city at the edge of autumn. We've known each other for years, flatmates long ago, then drifted, then a WhatsApp ping every few months until a plan appears. No drama, no baggage beyond knee supports and bad jokes. The forecast set a brief, clear window between two miserable bands of weather. We set off from the ski center in that cold blue hour when everything feels like it's agreeing with you. Callum is one of those quiet Scots who knows the names of hills and the Gaelic behind them, but never brings it up unless you ask. And that's why I asked while we traced a finger along the route, up to the plateau, over to the big summit, down to the hut by the loch if the wind got pushy. He told us people used to talk about something that walked up there in the fog, something taller than any man, seen only when you looked wrong at your own shadow. Nate laughed and said if it existed, he'd sell the rights to Netflix. I'm not superstitious about mountains. I just don't like them being underestimated. I'm saying this because a lot of what came later is easier to push away if you think we went hunting for it. We didn't. We went for a Saturday with tired legs and a Sunday breakfast by dark water. The walk up took our breath in the way climbs are meant to. The path turned to slabs and then to tilted blocks that moved when you were careless. Frost bit into the heather and made it glitter, and we kept stopping to watch crows dive like thrown knives. The mountain looked like a huge animal sleeping under a gray blanket. I take too many photos usually, but the light was flat, so I stuffed the camera away and promised myself the summit would be better. We kept a good pace, and for most of the morning we were alone, which felt like winning. Somewhere near a little tarn whose name we never learned, we passed a scrap of someone else's OS map caught in the heather. The corner with declination notes and the thumb-smudged 189. We joked about dropped breadcrumbs. We didn't joke that it looked torn, not cut. The mist found us around noon, the way it does up there. No drama, just a breath that thickens and keeps thickening until the world is a room with the walls 1 arm length away. We kept talking because silence in fog feels like handing over your wallet, and our voices sounded damp and close to our faces. Somewhere past Loch and Buoy, the path vanished and became a suggestion under our boots. That's where I heard the extra tread. At first I thought it was the wind bumping an echo along, but wind doesn't make echoes, and what I heard was heavier than our steps, almost lazy, as if someone with longer legs walked just out of sight, not rushing, not tired. I tightened the straps on my pack and told myself to concentrate on the next boulder and the next. Nate asked if either of us had said something. We both said no. The top arrived as if we had been walking toward it our whole lives. A cairn bigger than a car and the trig point with frozen rime combed by the wind. I can say now that the first strange thing we saw has an explanation, but in the moment, it wrung the breath out of us. The sun fought through the cloud, just enough to cast us forward, and a huge figure stood where our shadows stood, ringed by a pale halo like a wet oil slick. 3 giants mimicking us. The sight made the stomach lurch because our brains flung up how tall we looked. Then Callum laughed and showed us with his hands. Your own shadow on mist, the glory ring, a trick of light. He said the name people give the thing up here and shrugged as if even names were subject to weather. We touched the trig like touching a talisman, took a quick photo none of us has looked at since, and started off the other side. Going down over that boulder field is like trying to walk across a giant's knuckles with your eyes closed. The granite blocks shift. The moss is treachery. Everything has 3 extra surfaces you didn't plan for. We slowed and checked each step, and that's when the extra tread evolved into something specific. It matched us, but out of time, as if it had decided to take larger strides just a little later than we did. Step, 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 then a 4th sound, heavy, soft, a measured patience. Calum whipped around fast enough to slip and curse. The fog held up its blank face. Nate called out hello in that awkward, polite British way, like we might be in someone's way. Nothing answered. We waited, and that was the worst bit. The 4th sound kept walking a few paces past us before it stopped, as if the thing that made it had momentum of its own. We agreed without saying it that we wouldn't camp, not with the air closing around us like wet wool. The hut by Loch Etchican, Hutchison, wasn't far as the crow flies, but crows fly better than tired men, and fog eats distance. Callum tweaked his knee stepping down off a block, and we had to pause. And during that pause, the tread passed around us again. Light on stone, heavy on moss, slow, slow, never hurrying. The sense I got wasn't menace. It was ownership, like when you walk through a stranger's garden and hope they don't come out to ask what you're doing here. When the bothy finally loomed out of the gray, a square of dark in darker stone, I wanted to hug it. Inside smelled like damp pine and old smoke. The door scraped at the threshold. On the timber by the entrance were letters scratched with a key or a knife. F. Leith, as if someone had begun a word they didn't want to finish. Night came quick and absolute, and we were grateful for the walls until we started hearing the stones land. One ticked against the tin mug by my boot and made Nate flinch hard enough to smile apologize. Then another tapped the window slit deliberately. Not like wind, but like someone testing the skin of a drum. We told ourselves it was frost popping. We told ourselves it was a fox nosing around. The 4th footstep worked its circuit outside on gravel we hadn't noticed. Slow, then stopping, then slow again, like pacing during a phone call. The worst of it was the quiet between. Every time the steps stopped, the hush pressed on our faces, and my mouth filled up with the taste of copper. Callum said we should boil water and eat because food fixes mood. So we did, and the steam from the pot haloed around our headlamps, and I kept watching the latch. Around midnight, there came a sound that wasn't a step or a stone, a deep, slow exhale that swelled and faded, like wind traveling through a hollow length of pipe, except all the pipe was granite. It crawled along the roof side to side. Nate mouthed, "Did you hear that?" And I nodded, because if I said yes out loud, it felt like permission for it to come in. That's ridiculous, I know, but mountains make your reasons small. Then the latch lifted by 1/2 centimeter and knocked back down with a sound that jolted us to standing. The door didn't open, not even a little, and the gap at the bottom was too narrow for fingers. We pushed the bench in front of it and sat down on it like nervous medieval guards. Something leaned against the other side. The wood creaked. Not a shove, just weight finding a home for a quiet minute. It withdrew, and the steps began again, perimeter slow and tireless. Sleep came in jerks, like falling through a trapdoor and landing back on the same wooden platform. At first light, if you can call that watery, not quite brightness light, we opened the door, expecting the world to have put all its furniture back. Outside, the frost had painted the heather and flattened the mud to sugar. There were marks in it that didn't look like boot prints. They were longer, rounded at both ends, as if a heel and a toe had decided to be the same thing, and they were far apart, too far for any of us to step without a lunge. 3 in a row led away from the door, toward the boulders, and vanished where the ground went to stone. I considered getting the camera out, and then thought about how a photo ties you to something. Callum whispered that we should move. He didn't say quickly. He didn't have to. We cut the route short, aiming as straight as we could for the ski center, counting bearings and then counting steps, because that's the way you make distance out of nothingness. The fog thinned, and we could see a smear of ridge like a pencil line. The fourth tread followed for a while on our left, unbothered by terrain that made us curse under our breath. Every so often, it came closer until I felt it the way you feel a bus pass on a narrow street. A pressure that isn't touching you, but insists on being felt. Nate muttered that we should talk, keep talking, as if we were walking a city at night. I started telling the stupid story about the time I broke a lens on a wedding shoot and taped it together with gaffer because the couple never noticed. The tread kept time, patient tenor counterpoint to our three clattering voices. Something changed when we hit the road. Something simple and stupid like tarmac being a line it wouldn't cross. The sound faded as our boots clapped on the wet surface, and by the time we saw the car, the tread was gone or my brain refused to hear it. We didn't talk in the car. We didn't put on music. We just drove until trees replaced granite and then until houses replaced trees. In the roundabout where we stopped for petrol, I told them I'd email the good photos if there were any. We tried to say we'd be back soon when the weather learned its manners. It sounded like promising a kid you'll visit after moving away. I slept on Callum's couch that night because the idea of the A9 felt longer than the map said. And in the early hours, I woke to the sound of someone walking in the flat above us. There isn't a flat above his. The next day, after I got home, I opened the action cam because I'd clipped it to my strap and forgotten it. It had recorded 22 minutes of fog and breath and men saying, "Right, and mind that, and stop just there, mate." I was about to delete it when something happened in the waveform. Our steps are jagged little teeth, 4 or 5 a second when we hustled. The extra sound was slower, like a metronome, set too low for dance. And when we stopped to take a bearing, there it was, continuing for 3 beats past us, moving on into a space we weren't occupying. I dropped in a marker, then another where the exhale rolled along the roof, because it was there too, a sound thick as a cello across a wet finger on glass. I sent the file to Callum and Nate and asked if they could hear it or if it was just me making a mess out of random noise. They both replied with the same one-word text. Yes, a week passed. I slept, mostly, and I told myself it had been weather. I told myself it had been the knowledge of old stories curling up to nap in my head and then refusing to leave. Then 2 nights ago, Nate messaged our group chat at 0114 with a photo from his hallway floor. It showed wet marks leading from his front door to the bottom of his stairs. Long gray ovals that could have been made by someone stepping just before the water had time to dry, spaced impossibly far apart. He lives in a terrace with a locked gate and a door that drags on the frame. Callum replied first with an "it's late" and a forced joke about the landlord. Nate didn't answer for 10 minutes. And then he wrote, "I think it went upstairs, and I swear that's the stupidest sentence he's ever written." And it made my mouth go dry. There are no upstairs neighbors in his place either. Last night, I pulled a pile of secondhand mountain books from my shelf because sometimes facts pour sand over fear. One has a chapter where a climber from a century ago says he was followed on the big hill by something he couldn't see, step for step, but out of step, and he never went back. A different volume mentioned a trick of light that makes men look like towers when the cloud is right. It helped, but only in the way that naming a fever breaks it for a while without curing you. I tossed the books down and went to refill the kettle. On the way back, I noticed the dust on my desk had 4 tracks through it. My own messy smudges, a print from the edge of a book, and 2 smooth arcs as if a broad fingertip had tested the surface. Once, then once again, and then decided not to leave more marks. I'm writing this because I've started listening for it without meaning to. When I wait for the kettle, when I stand in the shower and the pipes rattle, when a bus breaks outside and the brakes sigh in that long, wet exhale. I'm not trying to summon anything. I'm trying to tell the story faithfully so that maybe it will go away, like speaking a bad dream out loud makes it less able to root in you. If you ever go up there and the weather turns and you reconsider your plan, listen to your worst self and come down. That's not melodrama. It's simple respect. The thing I'm trying not to type is the bit that keeps finding me at 3 in the morning, when the flat is quiet in that city way, full of tiny mechanical noises. It's the way the steps on the mountain always went a little farther each time than ours, as if they were rehearsing the route without us, as if they always knew where we were going next. Callum called an hour ago after I sent him a draft of this. He said he dreamed about the summit, but he was looking the wrong way in the dream, away from the cairn and toward a flat horizon, and the horizon stepped closer, not moved, not rolled, stepped. He'd woken to the sound of a shout from the stairwell. His building is a stack of silence after 10. He opened his door and found nothing but the tail of a draft that smelled like crushed heather and cold stone. We made stupid plans. Meet again in spring and do anything else. Drive the coast and photograph lighthouses. Sit in pubs with windows steamed and think about the next thing in a careful, ordinary way. It felt like saying grace. After we hung up, the window looked back at me and I saw myself in it, small inside my little room, and something behind that reflection had the wrong kind of height. If you're reading for a note of certainty, I don't have one. I can't prove anything beyond a recording that makes sense only if you were there, and an old word carved where men sleep in a box of stone, when the sky crushes down. I know we weren't chased like in a film. We were accompanied by something that didn't need to hurry. I know that since coming back, I've measured my own pace on stairs, heel and toe, testing whether I could make that longer spacing, and my thigh burns an answer of no. I know that the first time I heard the exhale out there, the mountain felt like it had lungs big enough to blow the whole fog inland and wash the town clean. I also know that 2 hours ago, as I walked up to my own flat, there were 4 steps on the carpeted stairwell ahead of me, though I was the only person in it, and they weren't an echo. They were a rehearsal.